Alright, so new idea for a video. I have been using Tempo Storm's meta snapshot for the last couple of years playing Hearthstone in order to climb competitively, and I find that the text guide that they write, while informative, usually still requires me to do some thinking, and because of that, I wanted to create a video talking about some of the top meta decks, how to play them, how to pilot them, what are the win conditions, and how you deal with some of those matchups, because that information is actually very important and quintessential to understanding how to pilot these decks effectively. For this video, I am using Tempo Storm's meta snapshot from December 1st, which puts ETC Warrior as its #1 deck. So today, we'll be talking about ETC Warrior. I want to talk about what the deck is, what are its win conditions, how do you play the deck, and what are some tips and strategies against certain matchups. I will note, there is not going to be gameplay in this video, so if you did want to see some gameplay, I am giving you that warning in advance. I think some of these guides are just very informative, and you kind of need to know the information. While some examples of gameplay would be really good, I am missing a couple of cards from building the full deck, otherwise I would give you guys some gameplay. If you do want to see gameplay with some of the videos that I do make, I'll just craft it, but let me know down in the comments below if you do want to see some gameplay going with these videos. Moving on. ETC Warrior is a new archetype from Madness at the Darkmoon Fair, which essentially creates an OTK combo using ETC God of Metal. The combo is 2 mana for ETC God of Metal. You would usually play a Penflinger onto it to deal 1 damage to damage it. You will play 2 copies of Bloodsworn Mercenary onto the damaged ETC to then create 3 copies of it, and play an animated broomstick at the end, totaling all 10 mana to give a full board of rush minions with 3 ETCs, so that every rush attack deals 6 damage to the opponent. That does mean the maximum damage output for this combo is 42 damage, although that number does decrease because the ETCs need to survive their attack when they rush into another minion. If the ETC does not end up surviving the attack, then that number decreases by 2 for every ETC that died. So generally speaking, if your opponent, say, plays a Libram of Hope as their 8/8, your ETCs are not going to survive hitting the 8/8, so that damage threshold for the first ETC is 6, the next one is 4, the last one is 2, then you're looking at a 36 damage threshold. Granted, if the minion was there on board somehow, you can go face, and that does do a little bit more damage. Sometimes if Rattlegore ends up being played earlier and you just kind of have to stick it out, but I'll talk a little bit more about those niche situations later. That's more or less the combo. The deck is very strong because it is a control style deck with 3 very solid win conditions. The first being ETC as your combo oriented kill threshold. Your second win condition is Rattlegore. I underestimated the card when it was released, and as it turns out, people aren't running Silence, and people aren't doing anything about Rattlegore. So it just kind of ends up feeling like a free win when you drop a body that just doesn't disappear. And lastly, your win condition, a third option against more aggressive decks, is gaining a lot of armor with Risky Skipper and Armor Smith. Being able to gain a ton of armor and comboing those out with more Bloodsworn Mercenaries, obviously, to then copy your Armor Smiths, usually end up gaining you so much armor that you just kind of nullify the health disadvantage you had early on against an aggressive deck. So moving on from those different win conditions and why the deck actually has been finding success, it's kind of important to also recognize some tech choices that people have been choosing to run. One of the most interesting ones on the current list of Tempo Storm's meta snapshot is Silas Darkmoon. Surprisingly, being able to rotate your minions around, while pretty powerful, is really good in the mirror matchup to steal your opponent's Rattlegore. And it's kind of shocking that people are starting to go to this extent to counter Rattlegore. This is why I originally underrated the card. The moment people start running removal for it, it becomes a 9 mana 9/9. Granted, it is a card that immediately requires you to answer it, or it will run away with the game. I just historically have said big minions like that are usually not that successful. Additionally, with the meta being so aggressive right now with how rampant Demon Hunter is in the meta, the armor gaining win condition for this ETC Warrior deck is actually very relevant, and it's just because of the fact that this is one of the best core decks that can get you into the late game to your win conditions. I am personally on the intent of not wanting to make this deck, and I feel like it's going to fall off, and the biggest reason is the deck's matchup into Priest, specifically the Highlander control variants of Priest. My issue for this is two reasons. Actually, it's all three of the different win conditions. You don't really win against Priest, right? Look, all three of your win conditions. Let's start. ETC, they have Mind Render Lucia. The moment you telegraph that you have the combo going, you lose. They just play Lucia, they rip your Penflinger, they rip your Brooms out, they could just play a Bloodsworn Mercenary. They'll just play ETC, and then you lose, right? Like, you can't do anything about it. And I think what's crazy too, I unfortunately wasn't recording games when I was climbing at the time, but another big thing too is it's an OTK deck that requires your opponent to play on the board. Is that a bad thing? Absolutely not. Is it kind of obvious to tell when they're trying to go for a combo and you just stop playing minions? Yeah. And maybe it's just because this is the deck that I was playing, but in the several matchups, I was playing my Libram/Pure Paladin going into an ETC Warrior. When they get down to like 4 to 5 cards and they're not really playing much, I stop playing minions. I don't press my button, I don't drop a minion, I don't play any Librams. I remember in one matchup, I literally milled 7 cards, and he sat there and milled 7 cards, and he was waiting for me to play something to give him 8 health worth of stuff to attack and OTK me with. I never did that. He realized because he didn't want to commit to any other win condition that it wasn't a good idea. So what ended up happening is he played a Rattlegore. Using my weapons and some other removal, I just ended up trying to clear it, punch it down to the point where it was nullified to minimal stats like 4/4. It still kind of hurt. I'll be honest, that hurt, but I didn't die. And because I didn't give him a board, his ETC combo, because he failed to recognize the win condition in that matchup, just sat in his hand until he started to lose to fatigue. He dumped his entire board, and then my Lord Barov plus Broomstick just wiped his board, and he lost. So it's important to recognize what your win condition is in every single matchup, and don't always assume ETC is the answer for every matchup. That's probably my biggest tip for you guys trying to pilot the deck. I will also say that, going back to the whole Priest lineup, Mind Render, Lucia, hard counters, ETC. You play the combo piece out, your opponent lost their win condition. Rattlegore is annihilated by Priest. Priest has several silence answers. I don't think the Nameless one is being run right now, but Plague of Death absolutely sees play, and Rattlegore falls right into that trap. Especially with Highlander Priest being good, Zephyrs probably will give you a good silence tool. And so, because of that, he's just not great. And once again, the win condition of gaining a ton of armor against Priest does work, but you just don't do anything to them. Sure, you can gain a ton of armor, but eventually they're just going to chip and poke away at your health. And as long as they know how to optimize and manage their resources, they beat you in that matchup. The one big thing about this combo that I need to make sure people realize is your opponent needs at least 7 health worth of stuff on board. Actually, a little more than that. It's 9, right? Because the Bloodsworn Mercenaries deal 2. So it's 2, 4, and then the 5/1 health thing. So 9 health of stuff. It's not impossible. You'll actually realize pretty often, like, people will play 9 health worth of things on board for you to punch into. The problem is, you need to be smart and not telegraph when the combo is in your hand. A very obvious sign that your opponent has the combo in hand is they're aggressively drawing to the point where they're comfortable milling. And if they're comfortable milling things out of their hand, you know they have the combo, 100%. When you play a combo deck, you do not try to aggressively draw and just hope you don't mill your combo piece. You never want to mill. So that's like step 1, it's very obvious. Step 2, if you do have the Hearthstone deck tracker, I would recommend turning on the cards drawn like by turn, so you can see this card was kept for since turn 2 or turn 3, because you can start to count how many pieces you know they don't want to play, because those are probably combo pieces. That information is marginal but beneficial, because They cannot play ETC in any other context if they are going for the combo. So if there's a card sitting in their hand since turn 3 and it is turn 18, you know they have a combo piece. Or it's a brawl they never want to touch. But we play it safe and assume they have the combo. So once you're in this matchup, you need to understand what the ETC warrior is trying to do for their win condition. And usually the ETC combo is strong, but with so many aggressive decks coming out, it just plays like a standard control list. And unfortunately, I think because of the matchup that's so bad into Priest for this deck's gonna fall off. If you see ETC Warrior come to the top, Priest is gonna shoot back into the top of the meta just to gatekeep ETC Warrior from getting out of hand. And that becomes not a big issue, but just my personal advice to say we don't craft cards for this deck. If you have the cards, go for it. It's a fun deck to play. Any combo deck is always entertaining. But you have to recognize your win condition gets nullified heavily because of one specific matchup. Not to mention that a lot of other decks can end up having some fair ground against it if you know what you're doing. With Revolve Shaman being there, just revolve away their Rattlegore, and there you go. You've solved the stickiest minion that can probably beat you down. The issue with Revolve Shaman, once again, you're a board-centric deck that is playing into the fact that their ETC can beat you down. So you need to take that into account when you're playing it. Demon Hunter, very aggressive. Usually the armor gain strategy works in that matchup. If you're playing against the Soul Demon Hunter variant or the OTK version, timing your Bulwark of Azzinoth is very important to make sure that the instances of damage you take, whether it's from a big swing from a Soul Shard Lapidary or the Il'gynoth OTK, that you can mitigate that damage, preserve your armor, keep yourself above at least a 36 health threshold. I personally would try and play to bump that number to 42 before I'd really aggressively start swinging using my weapon, because you don't want to give the opportunity to lose to any of those combos. With Hunter and Rogue also being very aggressive, probably another game where your win condition is going to be gaining armor. In the slower mirror matchups, like against another Warrior, Rattlegore is probably the answer because Warrior isn't running any silence tools at this point. So copying your Rattlegore's first win. And once again, in the mirror matchup, which I really like the rank 1 legend list from I'm sorry, man. I tried. This wonderful rank 1 legend player's deck. He runs Silas Darkmoon with the full intent of stealing your Rattlegores. And that is a powerful enough tech choice where you can consistently use it to just steal a couple things away from your opponent. You could do something small and then take away your opponent's Libram of Hope 8/8. You could do this against Revolve Shaman, steal whatever 10-drop comes from the Mogu Flesh Shaper. It's a very interesting tech choice that universally can work in a lot of different matchups, but that is in short what ETC Warrior is as a deck. My best advice to play around it, once again, if they telegraph the combo that they have the pieces there, don't play minions. It sounds weird. I have yet to lose a game. Of the 7 times I've tried it with different decks, I just stop playing minions and they lose the combo. Granted, you need something to do for removal, which I have in the form of, from the Paladin games, Lord Barov, Libram of Justice. For Revolve Shaman, it was Revolve, and usually I'd try to early on discover some removal tool in case that's the out that I need to go for. And beyond that, just recognize that the deck is strong against a lot of matchups, but I think as more people become aware of how the deck operates and plays, it's going to become more and more suboptimal to try and pilot this deck effectively, because the answers for it are honestly very easy to find. It's a control deck with multiple win conditions, which is powerful. Don't get me wrong, that is literally what control needed. That's why I was shocked to see Cthulhu seeing a lot of competitive play. Control decks just needed a win condition, and they're finally getting them. Shout out to Zach for saying those words. He's better than me at this game. But it basically just boils down to the fact that there are terrible matchups for ETC Warrior, namely Priest, and the moment people start to recognize how to get answers to this deck, it is going to fall off very quickly. The problem with like Demon Hunter was it was just such a powerful class that actually didn't have much counterplay to it. The fact that your Skull of Guldans and your Soul Shard Lapidaries could build up a 13 damage weapon, combining now with Il'gynoth to hit you for 26 in one turn. That hurts. But there's no counterplay to that, really. But ETC Warrior, I feel like I have not seen this deck perform to its best, and maybe that's because I'm just aware of how the deck operates. I'd like to know what you guys think about the deck. I personally think that it's an awesome deck that came from the expansion, but I think is going to fall off. I think the matchup into Priest is so polarizing that this deck will get gatekept, and the aggressive meta will ultimately just kind of roll this deck over. Granted, it is phenomenal at controlling aggro, but it's literally just Priest. I think I need to take a step back and just say Priest is going to gatekeep ETC Warrior from climbing. Play the deck if you want. I personally am probably just going to keep running Priest, and so that's going to be it for the video. If you guys do want to chat with me, I'm live on Twitch a few days out of the week, as well as active in a Discord community that's based around Hearthstone with me and my friends chit-chatting. I'll link both of those in the description below. But otherwise, you all have a wonderful day. I'll continue this series with a few other decks because I like giving that analytical understanding for piloting decks and knowing how they operate. But you all have a lovely day.